Sarah Chen walked into the big meeting room for the last time. Her shoes made small clicking sounds on the cold metal floor. Around her, hundreds of alien creatures sat in tall chairs, all looking down at the small human woman. She had done this walk many times before, but today was different. For 300 years, humans had been the nice ones in space. When other aliens started wars, humans stopped them. When planets got destroyed, humans helped rebuild them. When people were dying, humans brought medicine and food. The galaxy had learned to expect this from humans. The other species thought humans were weak. They thought being kind meant being stupid. They were wrong. Sarah reached the speaking area in the center of the room. Above her, the Draknari delegation sat with their sharp teeth showing. They had just killed 50,000 humans on 3 research stations. Their reason was simple. They said humans were making their space dirty with bad genes. "We need to talk about what happened," said Council Leader Vorthak, a huge creature with 6 arms. "The Draknari say they were protecting their territory. Maybe humans should just move their research somewhere else." Sarah looked up at the council leader. Then she looked at each group of aliens around the room. The Zephyrians who used slave labor on 20 planets. The vaccine traders who poisoned whole worlds to get rich. The Srak warriors who attacked anyone weaker than them. All of them expected her to say the same thing humans always said. They expected her to ask for peace talks. They expected her to offer help to fix the problem. They expected humans to be nice again. "For 300 years, Sarah said, her voice clear and strong, "we have been kind to you. When you started wars, we stopped them. When you hurt innocent people, we healed them. When you destroyed worlds, we helped rebuild them." Some of the aliens started laughing. The Draknari general was making clicking sounds with his teeth. To them, this sounded like another human speech about peace and friendship. "You have tested our patience," Sarah continued. "You have taken our kindness and called it weakness. You have taken our mercy and called it fear. You have taken our help and given us hate in return." The laughing got louder. In the Srak section, warriors were banging their weapons on their chairs. They thought this was funny. Sarah reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device. It looked like a normal communication tool. Every diplomat had one. "Today, 50,000 humans died because you could not stand the idea of sharing space with us. You killed researchers. You killed doctors. You killed teachers. You killed people whose only crime was trying to learn about the universe." The room started to get quiet. Something in Sarah's voice was different. "We have been patient. We have been peaceful. We have been kind." Sarah's finger moved to a button on her device. "Today, that ends." She pressed the button. "All human ships, all human stations, all human colonies, this is Protocol Midnight Sun. The age of kindness is over. Defend human interests by any means necessary." The room went completely silent. Even the Draknari stopped clicking their teeth. "Humanity officially leaves the Galactic Council. We declare war on any species that threatens human life or property. This is not a request for talks. This is not a plea for peace. This is a statement of fact." Council Leader Vorthak leaned forward. "Human Chen, you cannot be serious. Humans do not make war. You make peace." Sarah looked up at him. For 300 years, humans had looked up at these creatures with respect. Now she looked at them like a teacher looks at a child who has misbehaved too many times. "You are right. Humans do not make war the way you make war. We do not fight for land or gold or power." She paused and looked around the room one more time. "We make war to protect what we love, and we are very good at protecting what we love." The first alarm started going off in the Draknari section. Their home fleet was reporting something impossible. Human ships were appearing out of nowhere. Ships that were bigger than anything the Draknari had ever built. "Impossible," whispered the Draknari general. "Humans only have small research ships." Sarah smiled for the first time since entering the room. It was not a nice smile. "You never bothered to check what we were researching." More alarms started going off. The Vaxxon delegates were getting emergency messages. Their biggest mining stations were under attack. But the attacks were coming from directions where no human ship should be. "For 300 years, Sarah said, her voice getting stronger, "you thought we were weak because we chose not to fight. You thought we were stupid because we chose to help instead of hurt. You thought we were afraid because we chose peace instead of war." The Srak warriors were getting reports that their military bases were being destroyed, but the weapons being used were unknown. Technology that should not exist. "You were wrong about everything," Sarah continued. "We were not weak. We were being kind. We were not stupid. We were being patient. We were not afraid. We were being merciful. She started walking toward the exit. Every alien in the room watched her go. You have spent 300 years learning to take advantage of human kindness. Now you will spend however long you have left learning what happens when that kindness runs out. At the door, she turned back one last time. Oh, and Council Leader Vorthak, the next time we meet, you will not be looking down at humans. You will be looking up at us. The door closed behind her with a soft sound. For a moment, the great council chamber was silent. Then every communication device in the room started screaming with emergency alerts. Reports were coming in from across the galaxy. Human ships were attacking. But not just any ships. Ships that dwarfed anything in known space. The Draknari general stood up, his teeth no longer making clicking sounds. How is this possible? We monitored human space for centuries. They only had research vessels and medical ships. Council Leader Vorthak was reading reports on his screen. His 6 arms were shaking. The human research vessels were not research vessels. They were warships in hiding. The medical ships were weapons platforms. The science stations were military bases. In the Zephyrian section, Supreme Commander Kelth was getting reports that 20 of their slave worlds were in revolt. Somehow the slaves had gotten weapons, advanced weapons, and they knew exactly where to strike to hurt the Zephyrian Empire the most. 300 years, whispered Councillor Drex from the Vaxen delegation. 300 years they were studying us, learning about us. Preparing for this day, more reports came in. Human forces were not just attacking randomly. They knew exactly where each species kept their most important military assets. They knew exactly which targets would cause the most damage. They knew exactly how to hurt each enemy in the way that would hurt the most. And strangest of all, the human attacks were precise. No civilians were being killed. Enemy wounded were being treated and released. Prisoners of war were being fed and cared for. The humans were making war the same way they had made peace, with careful thought and moral principles. Council Leader Vorthak looked around the chamber at the panicking delegates. For 300 years they had been in charge. They had made the rules. They had decided who lived and who died. Now they were learning what it felt like to be on the other side. The age of human kindness was over. The age of human war had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. Admiral Marcus Torres stood on the bridge of his ship, watching the stars change. For 20 years he had commanded what everyone thought was a small research vessel, exploring the empty regions of space. Today the lies ended. Drop all stealth systems, he ordered. Show them what we really are. Around his ship the fabric of space seemed to ripple. What had looked like empty space suddenly filled with the massive shapes of human warships, not the small peaceful vessels the galaxy knew about. These were weapons of war, bigger than anything ever built. Torres' own ship grew from a tiny research craft to a giant dreadnought. Its hull was covered with weapons that could destroy planets. Around him, 1,000 other ships did the same thing. The human fleet had been hiding in plain sight for generations. Sir, said his communications officer, we're getting messages from across the galaxy. Every human vessel is dropping their disguises. Torres nodded. For 300 years, humans had played the role of peaceful explorers. They had let other species think they were weak. Today, the galaxy would learn the truth. On the bridge screens, reports were coming in from everywhere. The hospital ship Mercy had revealed itself as a battleship, carrying enough firepower to level cities. The research station New Hope had opened up to show massive gun batteries pointed at space. Every human presence in the galaxy was transforming from peaceful to deadly. Admiral, called his weapons officer, the Draknari fleet is approaching our position. They're demanding to know what's happening. Torres looked at the tactical display. The Draknari had sent their most powerful battle group, 12 heavy cruisers and 30 smaller ships. It was enough firepower to destroy most planets. Once, it would have been enough to scare humans. Open a channel to the Draknari fleet, Torres said. The main screen lit up with the image of Draknari General Vectos. His massive frame filled the screen, teeth bared in what the Draknari thought was a frightening display. Human vessel, the general snarled. Explain your presence in Draknari space. Your disguises will not save you from punishment. Torres stood calmly in front of the screen. Behind him, his crew worked quietly at their stations. There was no panic, no fear. Just cold professional focus. General Vectos, Torres said, his voice level. You wanted to see what inferior genetics could accomplish. You're about to find out. The channel closed. Torres turned to his weapons officer. Target their command ship. Use the quantum disruptors. Sir, are you sure? We've never tested those weapons on living targets. They killed 50,000 of our people yesterday, Torres replied. Today they learned the cost of that decision. The human ship fired a single weapon. It was not the bright energy blasts or explosive missiles that most species used. The quantum disruptor was silent and invisible. It reached out across space and touched the Draknari command ship. The enemy vessel simply stopped existing. Not destroyed, not exploded. It was there one moment and gone the next. Where it had been, there was only empty space. The remaining Draknari ships froze in shock. Their most powerful warship had been erased from existence in an instant. By a single shot from a human vessel. General Vectos is dead, Torres announced to his crew. Target the remaining ships. Give them 10 seconds to surrender. The Draknari fleet tried to run. Their ships turned and fired their engines at maximum power, desperate to escape. But human ships were faster. Much faster. The fleeing vessels were caught and destroyed one by one. Not captured, destroyed. The humans were sending a message. Meanwhile, on Earth, Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in her laboratory watching her life's work come to fruition. For 30 years, she had been the galaxy's leading expert on alien biology. She had traveled to every known world, studying diseases, creating cures, saving lives. Today, that knowledge had a different purpose. Begin production of the targeted viral agents, she ordered her team. Start with the Shrek and Vaxon variants. Around her, automated systems began creating biological weapons tailored to specific alien species. The viruses were not designed to kill. Humans still had moral limits, but they would make their enemies wish they had never heard of humanity. The Shrek virus would attack their aggression hormones, leaving the warrior race confused and docile. The Vaxon variant would cause intense nausea whenever they lied, a particularly devastating weapon against a species that built their entire economy on deception. Doctor, said her assistant, are you sure about this? Some of these agents could affect entire planets. Dr. Vasquez looked up from her work. She was thinking about the research station where she had spent 5 years, where she had made friends with humans and aliens alike, where 50,000 people had died yesterday for the crime of seeking knowledge. They made their choice when they decided human life was worthless, she said. Now they live with the consequences. On Luna, General Ahmed Hassan stood in the command center that had been hidden beneath the moon's surface for 2 centuries. Around him, holographic displays showed the entire galaxy. Every human ship, every human station, every human colony was now revealed in its true form. Status report, Hassan ordered. All stealth systems are down, reported his aide. All weapons platforms are active. All personnel are at battle stations. Hassan studied the tactical displays. Red dots showed enemy forces throughout the galaxy. Blue dots showed human positions. For the first time in 300 years, the blue dots were not trying to avoid the red ones. The Zephyrian Empire has mobilized their entire fleet, his intelligence officer reported. They're moving to attack our colonies in the Outer Rim. Let them come, Hassan said. They'll find those colonies are not as defenseless as they appear. He was thinking about the agricultural stations humans had built throughout Zephyrian space. The aliens thought they were simple farms. They were actually military bases, complete with weapons that could destroy entire fleets. Sir, called his communications officer, we're receiving surrender requests from 3 minor species. They're asking for mercy. Hassan considered this. The minor species had never directly attacked humans. They had simply failed to stop others from doing so. Accepted, he said. Grant them protected status under human space. But make it clear, any aggression against human interest will be met with total destruction. As the reports came in, Hassan realized something that filled him with both pride and sadness. The human military machine was working perfectly. 300 years of secret preparation were paying off. But it meant that humanity had changed forever. They had been the healers of the galaxy. The peacemakers. The ones who chose mercy over revenge. Now they were something else. Something that struck fear into species that had never known fear. On the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Torres received a communication from Earth. It was a simple message, but it changed everything. All human forces, came the voice of President Chen. You are authorized to use any and all means necessary to protect human interests. The galaxy chose war. Give them war. Torres looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the species that had pushed humanity too far were learning what humans became when their patience ran out. For 300 years, humanity had absorbed every insult, every attack, every attempt to take advantage of their kindness. They had been the galaxy's punching bag, and they had chosen to be. Now the choice was different. Helm, Torres ordered. Set course for the Dreknari home system. Maximum speed. Sir, what are our orders when we arrive? Torres thought about 50,000 dead humans. He thought about 3 centuries of attacks and insults and assumptions that humans were too weak to fight back. Total victory, he said. Nothing less. The human fleet moved through space like a storm of vengeance. Behind them, they left the wreckage of every force that had tried to stop them. Ahead of them lay the homeworlds of their enemies. The galaxy had wanted to see what humans could do when they stopped being nice. They were about to find out. Captain Sarah Kim crouched in the ventilation shaft above the Vaxxon mining station. Through the metal grating, she could see alien workers moving below. They had no idea that death was watching them from above. But Sarah was not there to kill workers. She was there to destroy something much more important to the Vaxxon Consortium, their profits. Strike Team Alpha in position, she whispered into her comm device. Ready to execute Operation Bankruptcy. For 2 weeks, Sarah's team had been infiltrating Vaxxon space. The aliens thought they were facing a traditional military attack. They were wrong. Humans had spent 3 centuries studying their enemies. They knew that some species feared the loss of money more than the loss of life. Remember, Sarah told her team, no casualties unless absolutely necessary. We're here to destroy their ability to make war, not to become murderers. Her team moved through the station like ghosts. They planted devices on the main computers, corrupted financial records, and released viruses into the data systems. Within hours, the Vaxxon Consortium would discover that their currency had been marked with traceable particles. Every transaction they had ever made was now visible to their enemies and allies alike. But that was just the beginning. At the same time, Dr. Elena Vasquez was releasing her biological agents into Srac space. The warrior race had built their entire culture around violence and aggression. They solved every problem by fighting. They respected only strength. Today they would learn what it felt like to doubt. The virus spread through Srac stations and ships like invisible smoke. It did not kill or cause pain. Instead, it temporarily changed the brain chemistry that made Srac naturally aggressive. For the first time in their history, Srac warriors began to feel uncertain about fighting. Commander Grex of the Srac battle fleet Bloodfang stood on his bridge, staring at the tactical display. Human ships were approaching his position. His orders were clear: attack and destroy all human vessels. But something was wrong. For the first time in his life, Grex felt hesitant. He looked at the human ships and found himself wondering if there might be a peaceful solution. The thought horrified him. "Commander," said his weapons officer, "the humans are within range. Do we attack?" Grex opened his mouth to give the order. The word fire should have come easily. Instead, he found himself thinking about the human civilians who might be on those ships. When had he ever cared about enemy civilians? "Commander?" the weapons officer asked again. Around the bridge, other Srac warriors were showing signs of the same confusion. Their natural bloodlust was gone, replaced by strange new emotions like empathy and doubt. The human fleet passed by without firing a shot. The Srac ships let them go. Within days, reports were coming in from across Srac space. Their fleets were refusing to fight. Their armies were laying down weapons. The warrior race was discovering what it felt like to want peace instead of war. Meanwhile, in Zephyrian space, the slave rebellion was spreading faster than anyone thought possible. On 20 different worlds, enslaved populations had risen up against their masters. But these were not desperate, doomed revolts. The rebels had weapons, training, and detailed knowledge of Zephyrian military tactics. Commander Lisa Park watched from orbit as the Zephyrian Empire's most important mining world fell to rebel forces. For 15 years, she had pretended to be a medical volunteer, treating sick slaves and injured workers. In reality, she had been organizing and training a revolution. Medical Station 7 to all rebel forces, she broadcast. Phase 2 is complete. All Zephyrian military installations on the planet are now under rebel control. The response came from a dozen different locations. Rebel Force Alpha acknowledging. Moving to Phase 3 objectives. Lisa smiled as she watched Zephyrian reinforcement fleets arriving in the system. They had come to crush a slave revolt. Instead, they found that the planet's defense satellites, supposedly controlled by the Empire, were now targeting Imperial ships. "This is Supreme Commander Kelth of the Zephyrian Empire," came an angry voice over the communications channel. "Rebel forces surrender immediately or face total destruction." Lisa opened a channel to the Imperial fleet. "This is Commander Park of the Human Liberation Force. The people of this world are now under human protection. Any attack on them will be considered an act of war against humanity." There was a long pause. Then, "You are one small medical ship. We are an entire battle fleet." "You're right," Lisa said calmly. "I am one small medical ship, but I'm not alone." Around the planet, space began to shimmer as human stealth fields dropped. What had appeared to be empty space was suddenly filled with human warships. The Zephyrian fleet found themselves surrounded and outgunned. "You have 30 seconds to withdraw from this system," Lisa announced. "After that, we will consider your presence a threat to human interests." The Zephyrian fleet withdrew. Back on Earth, General Hassan stood in his command center, watching reports from across the galaxy. The human war machine was working exactly as planned, but it was not the kind of war that other species expected. "Status report on the Draknari home system," Hassan ordered. "Admiral Torres has arrived in orbit," his aide reported. "The Draknari government is requesting negotiations." "And our response?" "The Admiral has agreed to talks, but only after they release all prisoners from the destroyed research stations." Hassan nodded. Even in war, humans were trying to save lives. "What about casualties?" "Enemy military losses are severe, but civilian casualties remain at 0. Our forces are maintaining strict rules of engagement." This was what made human warfare so terrifying to their enemies. Other species fought with rage and hatred. They destroyed everything in their path and celebrated the suffering of their enemies. Humans fought with cold, calculated precision. They could destroy entire fleets without harming a single civilian. They could bring down governments without firing a shot. They could turn a species' greatest strengths into weaknesses. And through it all, they maintained their moral principles. Enemy wounded were treated in human medical facilities. Prisoners of war were fed better than some species fed their own people. Civilian populations in war zones received food and medical supplies from the same humans who were destroying their military forces. "Sir," his intelligence officer called out, "we're getting reports of enemy propaganda broadcasts. They're calling us monsters and claiming we're trying to exterminate all non-human life." Hassan thought about this. What does the evidence show? Human forces have had opportunities to destroy dozens of civilian targets. In every case, they have chosen not to. Enemy military casualties are high, but civilian deaths are virtually 0. "Then let them call us monsters," Hassan said. "Their own people will know the truth." On the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Torres read the surrender message from the Draknari government. It was the first time in Draknari history that they had ever asked for mercy from another species. "Admiral," his communications officer said, "Earth Command is asking for your recommendations on surrender terms." Torres looked out at the Draknari homeworld below. It was a beautiful planet, home to billions of beings who had done nothing wrong except trust their leaders. He could destroy it with a single order. The Draknari knew this. "Tell Earth Command that I recommend accepting their surrender," Torres said, "but with conditions. They must pay reparations for the research stations they destroyed. They must release all political prisoners, and they must allow human observers to monitor their compliance." "Sir, those are very mild terms for total surrender." Torres thought about the thousands of human dead. He thought about 3 centuries of insults and attacks. He thought about how easy it would be to simply destroy everything Draknari. "We're not fighting this war to become like them," he said. "We're fighting to make sure they never force us to fight again." As reports continued to come in from across the galaxy, one thing became clear. Humanity had not just won battles. They had won the war before their enemies even understood what they were fighting. For 300 years, humans had studied every species, learned every weakness, and prepared for every possibility. When the time came to fight, they did not fight like angry animals. They fought like surgeons, cutting out the diseased parts of galactic civilization, while leaving the healthy parts untouched. The galaxy had pushed humanity too far. Now they were learning what happened when the most patient species in known space finally ran out of patience. And the most terrifying part was that humanity was still being merciful. They could have destroyed everything. Instead, they chose to save what could be saved and fix what could be fixed. They were still trying to heal the galaxy. They were just using different methods now. Council Leader Vorthak sat alone in his private chambers, staring at the reports scattered across his desk. Each piece of paper told the same story. The species he had governed for decades were surrendering to humans one by one. The Draknari Empire had fallen in 3 days. The Shrek Confederation had collapsed when their warriors refused to fight. The Vaxen Consortium was bankrupt and begging for financial mercy. 8 of the 12 major powers had already sent surrender messages to Earth. 6 months ago, Vorthak had laughed when Sarah Chen declared war on the galaxy. Now he was trying to figure out how to save his own species from total destruction. A soft chime announced that someone was requesting entry. "Come in," Vorthak said wearily. The door opened to reveal Councillor Threx of the Vraxian Republic. Unlike most species, the Vraxians had always treated humans with respect. They were also the only major power that had not yet been attacked by human forces. "My old friend," Threx said, settling into a chair with his multiple arms folded. "You look like someone who has seen the end of the world." "Perhaps I have," Vorthak replied. "Did you come here to tell me you warned us about the humans?" "No," Threx said sadly. "I came to tell you that I was wrong too. I thought humans were dangerous because they were smart and patient. I never imagined they were this smart and this patient." On the desk between them lay a report from the Draknari home system. Admiral Torres had positioned his fleet in orbit around their planet. The entire Draknari military was under human control, but instead of destroying their enemies, the humans had done something unprecedented. They had started rebuilding the research stations the Draknari had destroyed. "Look at this," Vorthak said, pointing to the report. "They could have turned the Draknari homeworld into space dust. Instead, they're using Draknari labor to construct new research facilities. They're even paying the workers fair wages." Threx read the report carefully. "The humans are employing former Draknari soldiers as construction workers. Their former enemies are building human bases and they're grateful for the opportunity." "It makes no sense," Vorthak said. "What kind of conqueror behaves this way?" The answer came from an unexpected source. On the wall screen, a news broadcast was showing footage from the Draknari homeworld. Human and Draknari workers were building side by side, but the most shocking part was the interview with a Draknari construction supervisor. "The humans saved my family," the alien was saying to the reporter. "When Admiral Torres arrived, we thought we would all die. Instead, he brought medical supplies for my sick daughter. He gave me a job with fair pay. He treats us better than our own government ever did." Vorthak turned off the screen. "They're not conquering us. They're converting us. And it's working," Threx said. "I've received reports from across the galaxy. Populations under human control are not rebelling. They're asking to remain under human protection." This was the most terrifying aspect of human warfare. They did not rule through fear like the Shrek. They did not rule through greed like the Vaxen. They ruled by being genuinely better leaders than the governments they had replaced. A communication alert sounded. Vorthak activated his personal comm system and saw the face of Supreme Commander Kelth of the Zephyrian Empire. The proud commander looked exhausted and defeated. "Vorthak," Kelth said without preamble, "I need to know if you will support a joint military action against the humans." "What kind of action?" Vorthak asked, though he already knew the answer would be desperate. "A final strike against Earth itself. If we can destroy their homeworld, we might be able to stop this madness." Threx and Vorthak exchanged glances. "Kelth," Vorthak said carefully, "how many ships do you have left?" "My entire remaining fleet, 47 vessels. If we combine our forces—" "Kelth," Vorthak interrupted gently. "Humans have been hiding their true military strength for 3 centuries. Do you really think Earth is undefended?" The communication ended abruptly. An hour later, they received word that the Zephyrian fleet had been destroyed attempting to approach the Sol system. All 47 ships had been eliminated by automated defense platforms that no one had known existed. Commander Kelth had died in the first volley. On Earth, President Chen stood in the same United Nations building where humanity had first voted to join galactic civilization. But now, instead of human diplomats preparing to meet aliens, she was receiving surrender delegations from across the galaxy. The first delegation was from the hegemony of Shrek. 3 warriors entered the chamber, but they moved differently than Shrek had ever moved before. Instead of the aggressive swagger that defined their species, they walked with uncertainty and what almost looked like shame. "President Chen," said their leader, a massive creature named General Throck, "the hegemony formally surrenders to human authority. We request mercy for our people." Chen studied the alien warrior. 2 months ago, this same being had been calling for the extermination of human colonies. The biological weapon had changed him, but she could see that the change was temporary. Eventually, the Shrek would return to their natural aggression. "General Throck," Chen said, "humanity accepts your surrender, but we have conditions." "Anything," Throck replied immediately. "Your species will undergo mandatory counseling to learn nonviolent conflict resolution. You will open your borders to human cultural exchanges, and you will participate in a galaxy-wide peacekeeping force under human command." Throck nodded eagerly. The idea of Shrek warriors serving as peacekeepers instead of conquerors would have been laughable 6 months ago. Now it seemed like their only hope for survival. The next delegation was from the Vaxen Consortium. Unlike the proud Shrek, the Vaxen representatives looked genuinely terrified. Their entire economy had collapsed when humans revealed the hidden tracking devices in their currency. "President Chen," their spokesman said, "the consortium offers complete financial records of all our transactions for the past century. We will pay any reparations you demand." Chen looked at the financial data on her screen. The Vaxen had been bribing officials, funding pirates, and manipulating markets for decades. They had built their wealth by making other species poor. "The consortium will be dissolved," Chen announced. "Your assets will be redistributed to the species you have cheated. You will work under human supervision to develop ethical business practices." "And if we refuse?" the spokesman asked weakly. Chen gestured to a wall screen showing the ruined remains of Vaxen mining stations throughout the galaxy. "You are free to refuse, but this is what happens to organizations that threaten human interests." The delegation signed the surrender documents immediately. As more delegations arrived throughout the day, Chen realized that humanity had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history. They had won a war without becoming monsters. They had conquered their enemies without losing their souls. But the most important meeting came last. Council leader Vorthak himself arrived with a small delegation from the remaining neutral species. Unlike the others, he did not come to surrender. He came to negotiate. "President Chen," Vorthak said as he entered the chamber, "I have a proposal. I'm listening. Form a new galactic government, with humans as the dominant species, but with representation for all peaceful civilizations. Create laws that prevent the strong from abusing the weak. Build something better than what we had before." Chen considered this. The old Galactic Council had been dominated by the most aggressive species. The weak had no voice, and the strong took what they wanted. "What about the species that attacked us?" Chen asked. "Probationary membership," Vorthak replied. "Let them earn the right to participate by proving they can live peacefully with their neighbors." It was not what Chen had expected when the war began. Humanity had set out to defend itself and had accidentally become the galaxy's new leaders. "There will be conditions," Chen said. "Name them. Human military bases in every major system, human observers in every government, and any species that attacks civilians will face immediate and total destruction." Vorthak nodded. "Agreed. The galaxy has learned its lesson about underestimating human patience." Chen looked out the window at the stars. For 300 years, humanity had dreamed of a peaceful galaxy, where all species worked together for the common good. Now they had the power to make that dream real, but it had cost them their innocence. They were no longer the naive idealists who had joined galactic civilization hoping to make friends. They were now the guardians of galactic peace, armed with weapons that could destroy worlds and the proven willingness to use them. The galaxy had forced humanity to become something they never wanted to be, but perhaps in the end it was something the galaxy needed them to become. 5 years had passed since humanity declared war on the galaxy. Now, Ambassador Sarah Chen stood in the Grand Assembly Hall on Earth, but she was no longer just an ambassador. The title on her nameplate read, Secretary General of the Galactic Federation. The hall was filled with delegates from hundreds of species, but the arrangement was different now. Instead of the old council chambers where aggressive species had dominated, every world had equal representation. The weak species that had been ignored for centuries now had voices in galactic government. Fellow beings, Chen began, her words translated into thousands of languages across the galaxy. 5 years ago, we gathered in hatred and fear. Today, we gather in hope. In the audience, she could see faces that told the story of the galaxy's transformation. There was General Throck of the Shrek, who now commanded a peacekeeping force instead of a conquest fleet. Former Vaxxan executives sat next to representatives from worlds they had once exploited. Draknari scientists worked alongside human researchers in the pursuit of knowledge instead of weapons. We did not choose to become your leaders, Chen continued. You forced us into this role when you made peaceful coexistence impossible. But we accept this responsibility, not as conquerors, but as guardians. Admiral Torres, now fleet commander of the Galactic Defense Force, watched from the military section. His hair had gone gray in the past 5 years, and his eyes carried the weight of decisions that had changed the galaxy forever. But around him sat officers from dozens of species, all wearing the same uniform, all sworn to protect civilians regardless of their race or homeworld. The most visible symbol of the new order was the ships themselves. Human vessels no longer hid their true nature. The massive dreadnoughts that had once pretended to be research ships now patrolled openly through space, their weapons visible to anyone who cared to look. But they were not tools of oppression. They were guarantees of peace. Under the old system, Chen said, the strong preyed upon the weak, and the galaxy called it natural law. Under our system, any species that threatens civilians will face the full might of the Galactic Defense Force. She gestured to a display showing recent operations. The Defense Force had stopped 3 attempted genocides, prevented 2 trade wars, and evacuated 4 worlds threatened by natural disasters. The same military machine that had conquered the galaxy now spent its time protecting it. Dr. Elena Vasquez, now Director of Galactic Health Services, had transformed her biological weapons research into medical breakthroughs. The laboratory that had once created targeted viruses now produced cures for diseases that had plagued alien species for millennia. Her proudest achievement was the longevity treatment that had extended the lifespans of 12 different species. The irony is not lost on me, she often told her staff. We learned to destroy their biology so perfectly that we could heal it just as perfectly. But the real measure of success was not in the grand gestures. It was in the small changes that had spread throughout the galaxy. On Draknari Prime, former soldiers worked in schools instead of barracks. They taught children about engineering and science instead of conquest and domination. The Draknari had discovered that their natural aggression could be channeled into competitive sports and exploration instead of warfare. In Srak space, warrior clans had become rescue organizations. Their ships, once used for raiding, now responded to disasters throughout the galaxy. The species that had once glorified violence now took pride in saving lives. The former Vaxxan trade routes had become humanitarian supply lines. Ships that once carried weapons and slaves now transported medicine and food to worlds in need. The trading skills that had made the Vaxxan wealthy were now used to ensure that no world lacked essential resources. Some of you remember the old galaxy, Chen said to the assembly. You remember when might made right, when the strong took what they wanted and when the weak had no voice. That galaxy died the day humanity stopped being patient with your cruelty. In the back of the hall, a small group of beings watched the proceedings with special interest. They were historians and philosophers from across the galaxy, documenting the transformation of galactic civilization. Their leader, Professor Thalen of the Crystalline Collective, had spent his life studying the rise and fall of empires. This is unprecedented, he whispered to his colleagues. Never in galactic history has a species gained absolute power and used it to create a more just society instead of exploiting it for personal gain. The humans are not acting rationally, replied Dr. Zenth of the Academic Union. They could take anything they wanted. Instead, they give more than they take. Professor Thalen nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps that is exactly why they succeeded where others failed. They fight not for conquest, but for principles. On the stage, Chen was reading from a document that had become the foundation of the new galactic order. It was called the Charter of Universal Rights, and it established protections that had never existed before. Every sentient being has the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, she read. No government may deny these rights based on species, homeworld, or genetic heritage. No military force may target civilians. No economic system may reduce sentient beings to slavery. The charter had been written by a committee that included humans and aliens working together, but everyone knew that it was enforceable only because humanity had the military power to make it enforceable. This was the paradox of the new galaxy. True freedom existed only because humanity was strong enough to protect it. Peace was possible only because humanity was prepared for war. Fleet Admiral Torres stood and approached the podium for his annual report. His words carried the weight of absolute authority, but also the burden of absolute responsibility. The Galactic Defense Force currently maintains 2,947 vessels across 427 star systems, he reported. This year, we have prevented 23 conflicts from escalating to war, evacuated 12 million beings from natural disasters, and interdicted 156 attempts to transport illegal weapons. He paused and looked directly at the camera that broadcast his words across the galaxy. Let me be clear to any species considering aggression against their neighbors. The Defense Force does not negotiate with those who target civilians. We do not show mercy to those who practice slavery. We do not compromise with those who commit genocide. His voice carried the echo of the quantum disruptors that had erased Draknari fleets from existence. Every being in the galaxy knew that humanity possessed weapons that could sterilize entire star systems. More importantly, they knew that humanity would use those weapons if necessary. However, Torres continued, his voice softening, for those who seek peace, who protect the innocent, and who work for the betterment of all species, humanity remains your strongest ally and most reliable friend. After the formal session ended, Chen stood on the observation deck of the assembly building, looking out at the lights of New Geneva. The city had become the unofficial capital of the galaxy, home to beings from hundreds of worlds who had come to Earth seeking opportunity and safety. She was joined by Counselor Threx, one of the few aliens who had been her friend before the war and remained her friend after. Do you ever regret it? Threx asked. The path humanity chose? Chen thought about the 50,000 dead researchers who had started this war. She thought about the millions of lives that had been saved by human intervention in the years since. She thought about the children across the galaxy who now grew up without fear of conquest or slavery. We lost our innocence, she said finally. We can never again pretend that the galaxy is a kind place full of rational beings who will choose peace if given the chance. But perhaps innocence was a luxury we could not afford. Perhaps the galaxy needed guardians more than it needed naive idealists. In the distance, a human patrol ship passed overhead, its lights visible against the stars. On board, human and alien crew members worked together to keep the peace that had seemed impossible just 5 years ago. The children born today will never know the galaxy we grew up in, Threx observed. They will think that peace is normal, that protection is guaranteed, that the strong have a duty to defend the weak. Chen smiled for the first time in the conversation. Then we will have succeeded. Deep in the classified archives beneath the city, humanity's true secret remained hidden. The war had not been won only through superior technology or brilliant strategy. It had been won because humans understood something that no other species had learned. True power came not from the ability to destroy, but from the choice to create. Not from the capacity to conquer, but from the decision to protect. Not from the strength to take whatever you wanted, but from the wisdom to build something worth having. The galaxy had tested humanity's patience for 300 years. They had finally found its limits. But in crossing those limits, they had discovered that humanity's greatest strength was not their capacity for violence. It was their refusal to let violence corrupt their principles. The age of human mercy had ended, but the age of human justice had begun, and the galaxy, for the first time in its history, was truly at peace. In the quiet moments before sleep, beings across the galaxy would sometimes remember the old days when might made right, and the strong devoured the weak.